Chapter 2. Not Human.
Theraint floated into the room. "I trust your showers and the clothes are to your approval?" Theraint inquired. Both nodded, a bit stunned. "Well then, if you would follow me." They got up and followed Theraint through the massive halls of stone. Most would expect this place to be cold and dark, but the walls were well lit. They had mostly etchings on them. Taylor looked at the work, astonished. The detail level was higher than anything he'd ever seen. Scott also stood in awe, but mostly from the entire situation, not the pictures on the wall. There were rugs on the floor with amazing patterns that looked to be very old. "I have to ask, Theraint, your home is amazing, but why in caves and tunnels?" Taylor asked. Theraint smiled as he led. "Your kind sometimes does not understand my kind, and justifiably so. So after years of living around you, I finally found a spot where I could wait a bit more comfortably." "Wait for what?" Scott said. "Well, that question will have to wait." Theraint replied. He chuckled, pleased with his own play of words. Theraint walked on through the hall. He opened a huge wooden door to reveal a high domed room. In the middle was a large round table with kingly chairs around it. The walls were lined with medieval tapestries. "Ga zitten." They sat at the table, which had a full bouquet of food and drink. "Please do not stand on occasion. Eat," Theraint said to the two. They tore into the food. It took them about an hour to eat their fill. In that time they did not speak much, and Theraint sat and drank a cup of coffee. "This room is amazing," Taylor said in between bites. "Yes, it's one of my favorites. I was born to royalty. The tapestries on the wall are from my family castle," Theraint replied. "It reminds me of the great banquets we had," Theraint said. After they were finished, Theraint led them into the room next door. This room was in stark contrast to the other. It looked much more modern, with a large theater system and computers and laptops. They sat in a leather sofa. "You must have many questions," Theraint began. But before either of them could voice those questions, he spoke again. "You may have guessed that I am not human. I am hundreds of years old. I was once human, but I was converted to what you would call a vampire, although it is a very unfair term." Taylor saw fear rise in Scott's eyes, and apparently Theraint saw it as well. "There is no need to fear. I will not hurt you. I do ask that you hear out what I have to say and take some time to think about it. It is a sign of a strong, cautious man, but do not fear me. No harm will befall you, whatever you choose to believe," Theraint said, looking directly into his eyes. Scott felt a bit calmer, although his heart raced. Taylor was also excited, but not afraid. Well, not too afraid. Mostly curious as to what their unlikely host would say next. "Before I explain much more, however, let me tell you of the beginning of my kind," Theraint said. "I said earlier that vampire is an unfair term. Over 1,500 years ago there was a young man who even back then began to understand that he, or anyone for that matter, did not use the full resources of their brain. We have since found out that he was quite correct. This is caused by the connections in our brain. He started work on ways to make these connections operate better and gain more connections." Theraint paused. Taylor and Scott waited intently for him to start speaking again. He succeeded, and failed in a sense, too. He had used himself as a test subject, and from what I know, he tried a total of 5 formulas. Some think it was the last of these, and some think it was somehow a combination of all of them. However, in any case, he never felt anything, nor did he change. He started thinking that he had failed in his pursuit. He stopped, not because he had lost devotion, but he had met the love of his life, and we all know love is a powerful force. They soon married and had 2 sons, Renard and Thénard. And very soon in their lives their father realized that something was different. They learned faster than anyone he had ever seen. By the time Renard was 19 and Thénard 17, They both had a great wealth of knowledge to draw from. They knew they were different. They figured that out at a very young age. But they still were able to fit in with the general population, Thrain said. The brothers were on their way home from a gathering and witnessed a murder. The murderer ran away when the boys ran to help, but the man was already dead. The brothers felt something come over them. Unable to resist their urges, they drank the body dry of blood. Thénard, frightened and disgusted at what he'd done, ran to his father's home. Renard, however, ran into the night. Thénard told his father all that had happened. His father locked him in a room and told him he'd be back, although he never returned. He went to look for Renard, and after 2 days he found him. Although no one knows why or how it happened, Renard killed his father. Thénard was let out by his mother after 3 days, and he found the thought of blood no longer consumed him. He began to live his life. He outlived his mother, his wife, and all his family, after which he went into hiding. He soon found out about his father's history, and he also learned the conversion process from some of his brother's work. At first he was disgusted at the sight of another of his kind, but soon he realized that a select few could bring great benefit to the world. He learned that if he bit someone, his teeth had a venom-type quality that would instruct the bitten's body to re-engineer itself and use more of its facilities. So you can see vampire is a bit unfair, because although we match the criteria of vampires, we do not match the legend in many ways. Thrain finished, and he did not speak for a moment. Taylor could not resist a question. "So, you're a genetically engineered human?" Taylor asked. "Well, that's where it gets tricky. We do not know if it was genetics. Many believe it was a chemical, or alchemy. I would not venture even a guess. All I know is it worked, and I can do things that, as a human, would be impossible to do." He closed his eyes and rose 4 feet straight in the air. Taylor and Scott both caught their breath. He lowered gently to the floor. Thrain waited for a moment and took a quick look at both young men. They both seemed to be handling the news extremely well. "I truly believe that people could achieve this level of control, but it would take many years of study and many more of meditation. The potion and now the bite is the shortcut," Thrain said. "There is the bloodlust, however, you must be aware of. I have heard it compared to drugs. Heroin is the one it seems to be compared to most often. It is quite an addiction, and you never truly beat it. I still crave on a rare occasion. I also do not want to give you a false sense of security. There are vampires who are quite evil. Renard converted people as well. They believe that they came from the gods, and that Renard is their prophet. Although he has not been seen for over 500 years, we believe he is still alive," Thrain said. "The vampires in his line believe humans are cattle, and they look at them as food, and no more. I realize it must be a great deal to take in. I remember how shocked I was when I heard it, and in my day we still believed in a little bit of magic." Thrain finished. "Well, actually, it makes a lot of sense," Taylor said in a matter-of-fact tone. Scott gave him a strange look. "It does. Most legends are based on some grain of truth. And this is the truth of that legend," Taylor explained. Scott shook his head in understanding. "But how did you become a vampire?" Taylor asked. "I was from a family in the Netherlands, and there was a man who lived next door that moved in when I was a teenager. He offered to teach me. I took him up. He is a wonderful teacher, and I still learn from him today. I figured out he was not human, and after much pestering, he broke down and told me. And when I was 25, he offered me the chance to convert, and of course I accepted," Thrain explained. "What about the light? Doesn't that hurt you all then?" Scott asked. "It can. Something about the conversion process makes you more susceptible to light. With a pair of dark glasses, I can walk in the sun. However, there is a strange reaction. If you continue to ingest blood, it will cause your ability to withstand the light to lessen and lessen, until at last Any light, whether it be sun or street lamp, and you would die, Thorane explained. So even the weaknesses are based in truth? Scott asked. Well, of course some. Some, however, do not. The cross thing is entirely wrong. The cross has no effect on any vampire, excepting one vampire that did not know his true history. He believed he was an abomination of God, and acted out the part. Thus, the legend that we are all heathen evil demons, Thorane said with a bit of a sly smile. Taylor took a long look around the room. This is amazing, Taylor sighed out. So you're immortal? Taylor asked. Age is something that does not have an effect on me. I can heal from mostly any wound, and I have entire control over my body. I can even change into other types of creatures, Thorane replied. Thus werewolves, Taylor stated. No, actually, I cannot become what a were-creature can. They become a unique cross between the two lines. They are definitely incredible to behold, but very recluse, Thorane elaborated. What's the history behind were-creatures? Scott asked. I don't have any idea. I've only seen two in my life, and one was very quiet, and the other was very hairy and extremely angry, Thorane said, smiling. Scott laughed, but Taylor had stood up and walked over to the bookshelf. Taylor, are you all right? Thorane asked. So I suppose you're going to wipe our memory somehow and then put us back to our normal lives, Taylor said. Thorane was very impressed at how fast he'd worked out the theory. Perhaps, Thorane said. Why would you do that? Scott asked. Think about it. Thorane can't let us go out and tell everyone, so there must be some way he can make us forget, Taylor explained. But you said perhaps. What's the other option? Taylor asked. That option is not yours yet, Thorane replied. It was clear from his tone that would be the end of that subject for now. Taylor looked around the room again. The walls that were not covered by bookshelves were covered with more etchings, but of places that Taylor had never seen. Thorane spotted his curiosity. They are by a very close friend of mine, Thorane said. They're so detailed. They're almost like they're real places, Taylor observed. They are real places. Most just not known to your kind, Thorane replied. Amazing, Taylor breathed out. He started to examine one of the pieces more closely. It showed a great garden. Is this still around? Taylor asked. Yes, and it's truly breathtaking. You see, humans are missing a good deal of the world, Thorane said. There are many things and places that they do not know about. This is the Graton Gardens, and it was constructed by one of the oldest. He built it over 100 years. But you must be tired, and I tire of the sound of my own voice, Thorane suggested. I could use some rest, that's for sure, Scott replied. Taylor felt as if he could stay up for hours, but he knew Scott needed to get some sleep to get himself back into his normal pace, so he decided to go along with the plan to sleep. May I take a book with me to read? Taylor asked. Yes, certain ones. Pick one, and I will let you know, Thorane said. Taylor looked through the shelves. His first three choices were not allowed by Thorane. Finally, he let him take one entitled The Rise and Fall of Atlantis. It looked very old. He sat up in his room until late hours of the morning, poring over the book. Although it was written like a somewhat flashy history book, the book gave reason to the legend. The book spoke of Thorane's kind, who still inhabit the sunken city. Taylor's heart beat a little harder at the knowledge that was revealed to him in the book. He had thought that Thorane did not allow him to read the first three for personal reasons, but he was beginning to see now. Thorane was not binding him, however protecting him. The knowledge in these books may be something he could not handle at this point. He made a point to ask for another in the morning. He finally shut the covers and laid his head down on the pillow. And although it came slow and with a linger, he fell deep into a much-needed sleep. Thorane sat in his own room at a desk. He was reading a book when his IM client chimed at him. He typed quickly into the keyboard. It is good that you still answer an email once in a while, Thorane tapped. The reply came, Busy. Why the urgent message? Thorane tapped the keyboard. They have shown up. Good. Have you told them yet? Yes, I may believe him after all, Thorane replied. I told you he knows what he's doing. The conversation continued, and across the house Taylor and Scott slept. The world outside continued, but for them it would never be the same. Taylor woke, feeling strong and refreshed. After he got out of the shower, Scott walked in the room. "Hey, man, how are you?" Scott asked. The sleep had done him good. The fear had eased from his eyes. "I'm hungry," he said. "Let's find Theraint, then," Taylor said, and they walked out into the hall. They walked into the dining room. A door stood open, and Taylor ducked his head in. There, Theraint sat, reading a book with a cup of coffee. "You know, it looks as if vampires have an addiction to coffee as well," Taylor said as he and Scott walked into the room. It was a comfortable room with a table. This is where Theraint normally ate, when he was not entertaining. "Just this vampire, I'm afraid. It has always been a weakness of mine," Theraint smiled. "There's a pot in the kitchen. There's some food in there as well." Taylor and Scott walked into the kitchen, and they both came back with a plate. They ate. This time, they were not so hungry that a meal could not afford a little conversation. "Thank you for the book, Theraint. I finished it. May I read another?" Taylor asked. "Well, that question was so well structured, it must have been greatly thought out." "Of course you can," Theraint said, a smile playing on his lip. Taylor was a bit embarrassed that the question had seemed rehearsed, even though it had been rehearsed. But the air did not hang. Taylor felt a definite calming presence with them, although he could feel it was not Theraint at all. After they ate, they moved back into what Theraint called the library. Taylor looked through the books, and this time was allowed to read his second pick. Scott now looked at the etchings on the wall. "So these are real places. Why do you hide from humans? You could change the world so easily," Scott asked. "Maybe, but we are not unstoppable, and most of us feel we should not fight at all," Theraint replied. "Not even the bloodlusters?" Scott asked. Theraint laughed at the term. "Yes, well, they have a need for power, and have been stopped a few times, and hopefully will be continued to be stopped," Theraint replied. "So your two groups are at war?" Scott asked. "No, my side has had a hand in subverting their plans, but for the most part their failure lies at their own blame," Theraint replied. He turned to the books. "So who is the stronger side?" Scott asked. "Numbers-wise, bloodlusting vampires. They are a little less discreet about who they convert," Theraint replied. "I suppose they're not as powerful as your side." "Well, there are some that are very powerful on both sides. From what we know, it seems that the level of power at your commands after you become a vampire is based on genetics. So just like humans, some are strong and some are weak," Theraint replied. "I see, but what I don't get is why tell us?" Scott asked. "You must know the proper history, if I am to be able to offer you the chance to join our kind," Theraint replied. "You want to convert us? Why?" Taylor asked, astonished. "You are more important than you realize," Theraint said. "You can have a day to think about it, and I will leave you alone to talk and think. Do not take this choice lightly. I will collect your answers at dinner. Remember, all the good and bad things we have spoken of. This choice will affect everything in your life. In some ways for the better, but also in ways not so pleasant. The addiction to the blood must be considered wisely, although I am very confident that the two of you would make it through it without much of a problem. Immortality is a double-edged sword as well. Although I admit I have had a tremendous life in my hundreds of years, I have also seen more wars than I care to say. I have loved and lost ones I have loved. More than I can count. Please understand, I do not tell you this to sway you from becoming vampires. However, only to give you a proper basis on which to make your choice. I will talk to you tonight. Make yourselves at home." Theraint finished. Taylor and Scott sat in shock. Theraint got up, and true to his words, he left them to think. "What the fuck did he just ask us?" Scott asked after a moment of silence.